Hi everyone, welcome to the channel or back to the channel. This video is mostly intended for my current Math 117 students. These are my college algebra students at ASU, and we have an exam coming up, and I've had a couple of requests for a video about factor problems, or problems involving factoring. There's three kind of styles of problems that show up in ALEKS related to factoring. And I've ordered them to go from kind of easier to more difficult. Um, if you want to skip ahead, I'll try to put chapters below so you can kind of skip through if there's a very specific problem you'd like to try. But if you have the time, I'd recommend that you try to watch the video in full because you'll see as we get to the more difficult problems, it's going to depend on some of the scaffolding that we've built from the easier ones. So without further ado, let's get started. Maybe a couple of disclaimers I'll make here is I'm just going to show you the way of factoring that I've found works best for the specific problems that I've seen ALEKS give us. There's a lot of different techniques for factoring. I don't plan on going through, for instance, the quadratic equation in this video, although that's a method that we could use. There's, factoring problems where the numbers get a lot gnarlier and you need to maybe work a little bit harder. But based off of what I've seen in ALEKS, the technique I want to show today, I think is going to work pretty well. So first problem here is we're given this quadratic 6u squared plus 30u minus 36, and it's saying factor completely. So when you're given a factoring problem like this, first thing I want you to do is notice if there is any constant term that you can factor out first. Now, in this problem, yes, that's kind of the style of the problem. This first batch, there's all going to be something that we can factor out first. What I want to say is, on the test, you're given something to factor. First thing to check is, well, is there a number that I can factor out from all of the terms? And looking at this, I can divide out by 6 and be left with something. So let's factor out a 6. So I have 6 times u squared, because 6 divided by 6 is 1, plus now 30 divided by 6 is 5, so plus 5u, minus 36 divided by 6 is 6, so minus 6. So we still need to factor this part, but notice now we've made this quadratic into what's called a monic polynomial, so meaning the coefficient on this u squared is 1, and that's a lot easier for factoring. Now, this is where that classic technique that a lot of you have seen factoring polynomials comes in, where we say, okay, to factor this, I want two numbers that multiply to -6 and add to 5. The key reason here why this works is because I have no coefficient on this u squared. So this comes down to, how we FOIL, and we'll see that in just a minute. So let's take a look here at -6. Now, okay, I want things that add to 5 multiply to -6. So I'm thinking, what if we did 6 times -1? So I'm going to factor as u, let's say, plus 6 times u minus 1. Now, this is where I want you to pay close attention to the factoring. This is going to come back to the more difficult problems, or we'll come back for the more difficult problems. But the nice thing about, these factoring problems is once I have my factors, I can check my work. So if I FOIL, so first terms, u times u gives me u squared. Then outside terms, u times -1 is minus u. Inner terms, 6 times u is 6u, so plus 6u. And then our last terms, 6 times -1 will be minus 6. So see, the reason why we need to multiply to -6 is the outer terms. And why we need to add to 5 is, well, these inner terms minus u plus 6u, that will give me 5u when I simplify. So u squared plus 5u minus 6. So that's how I factor the quadratic here. And then we can't forget the 6 out front. So our final answer is going to be 6 times u plus 6 times u minus 1. So I'll go ahead and type this in to the problem here. So 6 times u plus 6 times u minus 1. And then we'll check our answer. And we got it correct. So let's do, I think for each type of problem, I want to do 3 questions. So let's try one more, or 2 more for this one. I'm going to clear all drawings. And let's go on and try another. There we go. All right. Here's another one. And okay, again, factor completely. What can we divide from all of these uh, terms? Well, we can divide 6. So 6 again. Let's divide out by 6. So 6 times now. 6 divided by 6 is 1, so I'm going to be left with x squared minus, so 6 divided by 6 again is going to give 1, so minus x, and minus 4, because 24 divided by 6 is 4. So, okay, now what we need to do is go in and factor this quadratic. Again, the coefficient on x squared is 1, so I just need two numbers that multiply to negative 4, add to negative 1. So let's think about what we could do here. So two numbers that multiply to negative 4. Well, I could have 1 and negative 4, but when I add those, I get negative 3. If I did negative 1 and 4, well, then I get 3, so that's not good. I could do 2 and negative 2, but those are going to add to 0, so that's not great. What else could we do here? All right, so looking at this, and again with the 2 and the negative 2, so if I did negative 2 and 2, that's going to be, kind of the same. So actually, the roots of this, the way it factors is not nicely with integers, which is a little unexpected for ALEKS, but what I think they want us to do here, and what we'll check, is I think they just wanted us to factor out the 6 here. So let's type it in, and they're going to say, yeah, that's fine. So I'll do x squared minus x minus 4. I don't think this is one where using the quadratic equation would be exactly what we want to do. So unfortunately, this one didn't factor, as nicely, but they're not expecting us to do a quadratic equation. So let's try one more, and I'll clear our drawings. All right, so this one, we have 4x squared minus 28x plus 36. So let's factor out 4. So we have 4 times x squared minus 28 divided by 4 is 7, so minus 7x. 36 divided by 4 is 9, so plus 9. So again here, there's a 1 on the x squared, so it's like 1 times x squared. So I want two numbers that multiply to 9, add to negative 7. If it can be done with integers, then we'll factor it that way. Otherwise, we'll just kind of leave it as is, depending on what ALEKS wants. So 9 is 3 times 3. If I wanted negative 7, I'd have to do negative 3 times negative 3. Well, that would add to negative 6. So for instance, negative 3 doesn't work. If I wanted to do it with 1 and 9, I could do negative 1, negative 9. But neither of these are going to add to negative 7. So I think this is another one where ALEKS just wants us to factor out the 4 and call it a day. All right, so let's see. 4 times x squared minus 7x plus 9. And we'll check. Yeah, so that's what it wanted. So, okay, a little unfortunate that it didn't give us ones that factor that factor nicely. But okay, one thing I wanted to emphasize. So the next style of problem I want us to try is this one where factoring a quadratic with a negative leading coefficient. Now, these ones, I feel like having the negative leading coefficient, so that negative x squared, makes things, a little bit trickier. So what I'd like to do is let's just divide out by negative 1. So it's going to be negative times, now we have x squared plus x minus 20. And now we can factor this as we'd normally like to, right? So I want two things that add or multiply to negative 20, add to 1, again, because I have, this monic polynomial, there's a 1 times x squared. So what if we did something like 5 and negative 4? Because 5 times negative 4 is negative 20, and if I add them together, I get 1. And the way we check this, so we can do x plus 5 times x minus 4. And again, we FOIL and check. So we have x squared, and then minus 4x plus 5x, and then minus 20. And again, negative 4 plus 5 gives 1. So this is going to be x squared plus x minus 20. So important thing for if you're going to do it this way is just don't forget to put that negative out front. So our answer for this is going to be, let me type it in. So negative And then we have x plus 5 times x minus 4. And let's check. Oops, let's see. Something went wrong. Try reloading the page to work on this question. All right, let's reload the page and try again. Oh, they gave us a new one. All right, that's fine. Let's try again. So I will clear the drawings and let's do kind of the same game here. So let's factor out. So this is a nice one because they have a 3 out front here. So we can't use kind of our normal trick of multiplying to -8 and adding to 10. So this is really great because I know a lot of you have questions specifically on this kind of problem. So I'm going to factor out negative, and I'm going to have this as 3u squared minus 10u plus 8. So I factored out a negative. Now, when I factor this, so it's going to have the form u times u. That's how I'm going to get the u squared. But now I need to get this 3. And only things that multiply to 3 are 1 and 3, or I could do -1 and -3. But let's try it with 3. So I'm going to have 3u times u. That will give me 3u squared. Now, whatever term I put here and here, I know those are going to need to multiply to 8. And I also need middle terms to be -10, to somehow add up to -10. The thing to keep in mind here is when we FOIL and do the outside terms, I'm going to have 3u times whatever number I put here. So when I think about things multiplying to 8, and because there's a negative here, I'm going to do negatives and negatives. So if I do something like -2 times -4, so let's put the -2 here. When I FOIL, so outside terms, 3u times -2, that's going to be minus 6u. And if I put the minus 4 here, I'm going to have minus 4u. And then out here, plus 8. And if I simplify, I get 3u squared minus 10u plus 8. Now, you might be thinking, how did I know to put the -2 here and the -4 here? Part of that's just I've done a lot of these in intuition, but also keeping in mind, I know whatever it is I'm going to be multiplying, whatever I put here, I'm going to be multiplying by 3. So if I put the -4 here, well, 3 times -4 would be -12, and already that's more than I want for this middle term. So that's kind of what gave me the hint to put -2. So our answer, don't forget, we have this negative out front. I'm going to have negative times 3u minus 4 times u minus 2. And let's type it in and see what we get. All right, so negative 3u minus 4 times u minus 2. And let's check. Perfect. All right, for good measure, let's do one more of this kind. So I'm gonna clear drawings. Another one, perfect. This is more practice where I have, this leading coefficient is not 1. But okay, negative, same strategy. Let's factor out the negative. 2x squared plus 3x minus 9. All right. Now I know I'm going to have x, and x is going to give me x squared. How do I get 2x squared? Well, things that multiply to 2 are 1 and 2. So let's put 2 here. Let's leave that with x. Now, okay, whatever numbers are here, they're going to need to multiply to -9. Eventually, I'm going to want to get plus 3. So multiplying to -9, I could do -3 and positive 3. And you see what I'm going to put here? Because remember, whatever number I put in this spot, I'm going to multiply eventually by 2. So what if I did 6x minus 3x? That would give me 3x. So let's put plus 3 here, minus 3 here, and let's FOIL and double check our work. And don't forget, there's going to be the negative out here. All right, so 2x times x is 2x squared. Outer terms, we have 2x times 3 plus 6x. -3 times x is -3x. -3 times 3 is -9. If we simplify this, so I'm just putting the negative from our first thing that we factored out. Well, this is 2x squared. This is just checking our work. 6x minus 3x is plus 3x minus 9. That's exactly what we wanted to factor. So Let's type in our answer. Let's see. So we're going to have a negative, and then we're going to do 2x minus 3 times x plus 3, and we'll check. Perfect. All right, now I'm going to move on to the last style of problem, which we've already gotten some practice with, and that's going to be factoring, the quadratics where the leading coefficient, so that coefficient on x squared is not equal to 1. All right, so here's another problem, really similar to what we've been working on, but now we don't need to deal with a negative leading term, but here we have a 2, and 2 doesn't evenly divide 17 and 17, so don't really want to try factoring out of 2. But let's kind of use our strategy that we saw previously. So I'm going to have z times z is going to give me the z squared. Now 2, how do I get 2? I could do 1 times 2, so let's put 2z in z. And now whatever two numbers I put here, they're going to need to multiply to 30. And keep in mind, whatever number is here, it's going to get multiplied by 2z plus something times z, and that's going to need to add to 17. So two things that add to or that multiply to 30, we could do 6 and 5. Now notice if I put the 5 here, so if I do plus 5 plus 6, well then what goes wrong is the middle term. When I do the 2z times 5, I'm going to get 10z plus 6z, that's 16z, that's not 17. So this is not what we want. But what if we switched the order? So plus 5 times z plus 6. Now 2z times 6, that gives me, well, let's do the outer terms first. So I get 2z squared plus 2z times 6. It's going to be 12z plus 5 times z, so plus 5z, and then plus 5 times 6 plus 30. Now notice 12z plus 5z, that gives me 17z. So that tells me that this is the correct answer. So let's check our work. All right, so we have 2z plus 5 times z plus 6, and let's check. Ah, something went wrong again. I don't know what's wrong with the internet. I'm going to refresh the page, and that's okay. We'll try another one. Let me clear the drawings. All right, let's try this one. All right, so we have, let's see, 3z 3z squared plus 14z minus 24. Nothing we can, divide out from all of them other than 1. So let's do z. How do I get 3? Well, 1 and 3. So let's do 3z. Now, okay, multiply to negative 24, whatever numbers I put here, add to positive 14. And whatever number I put, on the right-hand side here, I'm going to be multiplying by 3z. So what if we did, so 24, negative 24, I'm thinking, what if we did 6 times negative 4? Because if I put, let's see, positive 6 here, 3 times 6 is 18, so we'll get 18z. If I do minus 4 here, minus 4z, that's going to give me 14. So to kind of, go through it, 3z times z is 3z squared. 3z times 6 is plus 18z. Minus 4 times z minus 4z. Minus 4 times 6 minus 24. 18z minus 4z, this gives me 14z. So we get back the original polynomial. So that tells me when we factor, we get 3z, let's type it in, 3z minus 4 times z plus 6. And let's check our work. Nice. All right, let's do one more, and then I think we'll call it a video. So let's clear drawings and try one more. All right, this one, all right, again, I have a 25, 3, and 8, so not going to want to divide anything out. But let's, again, practice with the technique that we've seen. So I have I was going to write x squared, but we want x and x. This is a little interesting too, because now to multiply to 8, well, I have some options, right? I could do 4x and 2x. All right, and let's see, I have positive 3 here, negative 25 here. So let's kind of see what's going on. The fact that we have these negative middle terms tells me that to multiply to 3, I'm going to want, you know, negative numbers. So like negative 1 times negative 3. And then 3, well, the only things that multiply to 3 are going to be 1 and 3. So we're going to need negative 1 and negative 3. Now, what I'm thinking is, well, I need to get to negative 25. And I know my outer numbers here. If I have negative 3 and negative 1, well, okay. If I did, 4x times 2x, well, then 4 times negative 3 would be negative 12. And then, you know, minus 2x. That's not going to give me that negative 25. So that's telling me, let's put the 8x out here. Leave this as 1x. And now notice, all right, so I'm going to get, outer terms or first terms. I get 8x squared. Now, 8x times minus 3, that's going to be minus 24x minus x plus 3. 24x minus x, that's going to give me negative 25x. So that tells me that these are correct factors. So let's, type this in, see what we get. All right, so we're going to have 8x minus 1 times x minus 3, and we'll check. All right, we got it correct. So I think, this video is already getting kind of long, but hopefully this was helpful. Please drop some comments if you have any questions or concerns. I also don't want you to think that, a lot of these we got on the first try, but on your own, you might need to test, a lot of different numbers before you kind of get it to work. There's going to be some guess and check. Benefit, of doing a whole bunch of these is that you get some intuition, and that's how, sometimes I'm able to look at it and take a pretty good guess of what it might be. So don't despair if you need to, try these a couple times before you get it. What's important is that, you kind of know the general process. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.